Welcome to another lovely talk on the Pain Free podcast, A Positive Future for Health. And today we have Noel Clerkin, who is going to be talking about uh, using a heart monitor to reduce stress and build resilience. And this is a bit of a change because we were going to have somebody else on, but I didn't know Noel knew all about this. So I think you're going to find this very interesting and very, very helpful. So, Noel, we met many years ago. I think you said 15, but I was thinking my boy is 14, and I don't think I was pregnant when I met you. So, could it have been more than 15 years? It's 15 years plus, something like that, isn't it? And
Yeah, it's about that. It's been a while, put it that way.
it's been a while. And we just bumped into each other recently and had a good chat and caught up with things. And yeah, you're going to be talking about this very interesting and helpful subject. So I leave it all to you. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Althea. Yeah, I mean, this is a lastminute.com situation. So, Althea, we happened to be chatting this afternoon, and she said, "Oh, it looks like my podcast guest may not be able to make it." And I was like, "Well, if you want someone to step in, I'm happy to step in." So
Very
that's
grateful.
that's how this all came about. So if you didn't get much of a heads up about today's topic, that's why. Nor did I. Well, I know the topic. You'll be um, grateful to know that I do that. I've been working in the field of coaching for the last 20 years, so I'll just introduce myself. I've got some slides here just to guide the presentation. And I've been coaching for over 20 years. I now run an organization called Wiser Working. We work primarily in the corporate space, but not exclusively. We do have one-to-one clients who, come to us, and we have, different pricing arrangements with our individual, or what I call consumer clients as opposed to corporate clients. And yeah, either way, we're in the business of helping people to perform better under pressure. Now, lots of people, of course, are under pressure either through their um, in their professional situations or in their domestic situations. So there's a lot of things that can stress people out these days. So it's important to be able to cope with all the things that are coming at us from all directions. And
Definitely.
it's really a life skill, I believe, in the 21st century to know how to handle pressure in a way that you don't burn out. So prior
Fantastic.
to becoming a coach, I worked in the corporate sector myself. I worked in banking and financial information services for about 12 years. I worked in Dublin, London, and in Paris, and also in New York. I was in New York for 2 years, and at that stage, I had a bit of a burnout myself. So some of the material that I'm teaching today, I only wish I knew some of that when I was living in New York, because I was having quite a hard time over there. I was beginning to question my direction, my meaning of life, etc. And it was because of those experiences, I think, that I became motivated to become a coach back in 2002. So it's quite a while ago, and not many people were getting into coaching. My friends and family thought I was a bit crazy, but for me, it felt like the right thing to do. And here I am still doing it. So I guess it worked out okay in the end. But one of the things I noticed over the years in working with corporate clients, mainly on helping them to manage, like leaders, to help them to manage their teams better, how to be more productive in the workplace, I noticed that nobody was talking about stress. And it was very obvious that people were becoming more stressed. So when we were running leadership training programs, for example, we were, taking people into nice environments and hotels in the countryside, and they were spending 2 or 3 days there learning, different approaches to how to manage better, how to listen better, for example. And we were doing role plays, and it was all great, except when they went back to the workplace, the things that they learned in the training didn't seem to materialize so well in the workplace. And the reason for that is because they were thrown into stressful environments. So it's very hard to be a good listener, for example, when you're feeling stressed. You're in that kind of fight and flight mode, which I'll talk about later.
And there's all
So
kinds of different kinds of stress environments. It might be a difficult relationship, marriage. It could be work. It could be And a lot of people who come onto these podcasts have physical conditions, and that's a kind of stress as well.
Absolutely, Althea. So I will talk about the four types of stress. So what I was observing, and one of the reasons for creating Wiser Working in 2016 was to address that niche that I saw where leaders needed to understand more about their stress and how to handle themselves better so that they could become more effective leaders and colleagues in their own workplace. But of course, leaders, I always remind people, leaders are humans too. And so we're all human, we're all wired in the same way. We all respond to stresses more or less in the same way. So we can become, um, we can withdraw into ourselves, we can withdraw from life and hide, or we can lash out and be aggressive and assertive if we're feeling under too much pressure. So neither of those are really healthy things for ourselves or for those around us. And these are some of the things that I want to be able to pass on in today's presentation, the things that I believe work well, and also how to measure what's going on, because a lot of us are quite blind, I think, to the levels of stress that we may be experiencing. And in my experience, people tend to underestimate their stress levels. And so it's not until they measure them that
And I
they
think you just sort of get on with the day, isn't it? You're in a situation, and sometimes you don't even see your patterns and what's triggering you, maybe, or maybe you know your past and your patterns, but you don't realize that it's affecting you in the moment.
exactly. So the
You know?
more aware you can become of some of these patterns that you have, the more you're able to then do something about it and take some control back.
Definitely.
So if you've
That's
ever found yourself in a situation where you're thinking, if only I wasn't so stressed, if only I had better sleep, if only I had more energy and mental clarity, or more time for myself and my family, then this will be a helpful presentation for you, because a lot of it's about building your battery or building your resources to be able to have all these things. Because when you run out of energy, it's very hard, to have that mental clarity. It's very hard to be present with your family as well, and those people who depend on you, for example.
you
So
just sort
it's
of go on.
yeah, it's really important that we look after ourselves and maintain those good battery levels.
It's like fight or flight. You go into fight or flight, isn't it? Then you're on a sort of nervous. You're on your nervous system. You know?
Exactly, and that's a bad road to be on if it becomes chronic. So I'll look at that as we go along. So the response to this, to be able to have these things or to address these things, is to build resilience. And we define there's various different definitions of resilience. Some people refer to it as bouncing back from a setback. But I think it's more broad than that. I think it's not only about bouncing back from setbacks, it's just the ability to perform uh, at our optimum level in the face of the demands of 21st century working and living. So, for example, I don't need to tell you about the perils of technology and social media and how easy it can be to get drawn into some of those things. These are things that didn't
Totally.
really exist, 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. So that we're trying to do things and pay attention to lots of things simultaneously in ways that I think we're not really wired for. So we think that we can cope with all of these things, but we're not really so equipped to do so. So resilience, therefore, comes into play. And I, some people ask me, what's the difference between resilience and stress management, which is a good question. I think stress management is more like the tactical approach to things. So let's say you're feeling very stressed or at a low ebb and you go off on a holiday and you come back from that holiday. That ideally it's a 2 week holiday, although most people only get 1 week these days. If you come back from that holiday, you feel ideally you'll feel refreshed, and the things that seemed like insurmountable problems before you went away are suddenly much more manageable because you've had
Mm.
the time out to recharge from your holiday. However, you might then go back into having the same pattern of working and living as you did before the holiday, and you then recreate the same problems again, and then you're looking to book another holiday. So those are examples. That's a good example of stress management. You've managed the stress that was building up, but you haven't really equipped yourself to prevent it getting to that level again in the future. And so resilience, I think, is more of a long-term play. It's a more strategic approach to how you live your life, whereas stress management is more about tactics. Does that make sense?
Totally. So how do you do that, Noel?
Okay, so I will share. Well, firstly, I'd like people to think and just check in with themselves about how do you think you could benefit from being more resilient. So just take a moment to think about that. Are there any areas of your life in particular where you feel that they're being negatively affected by having a lack of resilience, a lack of ability to cope with the pressures
Do,
that you're
do,
facing?
teenage children have to count?
Yeah, so unless they're moving out sometime soon, which they're probably not if they're teenagers, those teenagers will be in your life for a while. So how can you equip yourself to respond to the demands of having teenage children?
So I suppose look after my health, my relaxation, go and do things that fill my cup.
Exactly.
Big part of what I teach in Pain Free, and um, go and chill out. Maybe talk to other mums or professionals. Um, I've got that radar of how do I cope with this? I go searching on the net or keep an eye out for friends, what they say, and have chats with other mums.
Yeah, that's interesting because you mentioned having chats, and that's one of the things that's really important, which is connection. So that falls into the three C's of building resilience. So connection is one of the three C's. So stick around, and you'll hear about the other.
Gold
You'll hear
star.
about the other two. Uh, so there are three things overall that will build your resilience. Three approaches that I'm going to share in this presentation. So tips and life hacks are not enough. I mean, you'll find any amount of these on YouTube, and they're all great. There's loads and loads of good stuff out there about how to, um, get quick wins and get a life hack that's going to improve your well-being. But I believe these things don't stick. They don't stick unless you have an underpinning framework or some sort of framework for how you live your life. These things are more likely to stick if you have a guiding philosophy or framework. So these are some of the things I'm going to share with you that will help to build that framework for yourself. So to build resilience in a sustainable way, I believe it's important to become stress aware. So recognize your stress and ideally get some data insights. So I'll be looking at that. And secondly, to understand the science of resilience. So we have a model which we call the core model. I'll touch on that. And also to prioritize nurture. So you mentioned, Althea, just now, filling your cup.
Yeah.
That's a lovely
Mm.
expression because we are designed to take rest and recovery. We just don't always do it. But we are
I,
very cleverly designed to be able to replenish ourselves. But in the modern era, we don't just do such a good job of that.
I have to talk to myself, and I get a bit workaholic myself with as you talked about gadgets and online on computers, lots to do behind the scenes of my work. But I have to talk to myself, think, right, that's that feeling of just do this, just get this done, just go and do this, just sort that out. But actually, that's tension. So I have to talk to myself, say, go play the piano, go into the garden, go and have a cup of tea.
Exactly, and that's part of that awareness issue that we have here. Point number one: becoming stress aware. So knowing and being conscious of, that maybe the warning signs. If you, for example, for me, one of the warning signs is if I'm driving and somebody does something silly on the road, because of course nobody can drive as well as I can. So if someone makes a silly, unpredicted, maneuver on the road, or they cut in front of you, on one day that wouldn't bother me in the slightest, but on another day I'll get very irritated and I might even honk the horn. And so when I'm doing that, I realize, that's a flag for me that I'm a bit irritable and a bit stressed. And so that's you may have your own kind of stress triggers, but for me that's
Mm.
one of them. So I realize I'm not completely zen like on the inside when small things are starting to get to me. Uh, anyway, so let's look at these three things. We'll break them down a bit. So becoming stress aware. So, what is stress? Our definition of stress is that stress is the body's way of responding to any kind of demand. So, if you go to the gym and you lift some weights, you're putting your body under stress. You know, your body has to work very hard to handle that load. If you're doing like any type of physical activity, it's a form of stress on the body. Um, so if you think about it in that way, there are different types of pressures that we can put on the body that require the body then to respond and to um, work harder than it needs to. Having said that, not all stress is bad. If we didn't get stressed, we wouldn't grow. So these are prompts for us often to grow and develop. But obviously, we don't want them to become unmanageable. So let's look at the four different types of stress. And I was saying earlier that in my experience, people underestimate the stress that they're under. And I think it's because they don't know what all the different types of stress look like. So I remember years ago when I worked in New York, I was transferred from a company in London to New York. And I thought I was going to love New York, but actually I hated it because, at least at the outset, I didn't like my job. It was a new type of role in the organization. It was very technical. I worked for a financial information company in the World Trade Center actually in 1999. And so I was in a new
Oh,
role, surrounded by new people, and it was a very steep learning curve for me, and I didn't handle that transition as well as I thought I would. Um, so, but I remember somebody saying to me, one of my friends saying, "No, you look a bit stressed." I was like, "Oh, I'm not stressed. I mean, I work 9 to 5, so I can't be stressed." And so my definition back then, my narrow frame of reference for what stress was overworking or working long hours,
yeah.
which I wasn't, but I was struggling in other ways. And so some of the ways that I was struggling were anxiety. Sorry, I was anxious because I didn't think I was doing a good enough job, and I was wondering, is somebody going to find out that I'm not as good as they thought I was, because I was doing something that was quite new. So psychological stress is the one that I think people associate most when they think that that's the concept of stress that most people have. So the idea that you're um, maybe under pressure, you're pulling your
Mm.
hair out because you don't know how to resolve something, you don't think you've got enough time to do it, or you're worried and anxious. So these are the types of um, things that I think people associate stress with the most.
And
So
and it can
psychological.
be in all walks of all reasons why we feel those very same feelings. And it mean, some people have on a medical side of things, some people have it from past traumas, or maybe they picked up ways of behavior and don't feel good enough in themselves. So there might be resentment and anger and lack of control, all these same feelings. As you say, everyone's, doesn't matter what environment you're in, it's human, isn't it, to have psychological stress on different levels for all sorts of different reasons. Demands of the kids, or the family, on the house, or of pressure from other people around you, and all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does come back to a lot of it to lack of control because if you've got like kids, you can't control how they're going to act as much as you'd want to, or what the things they're going to say. And it's the same with colleagues at work. You know, there's things you'd like to be able to control, but you can't. And so that unpredictability can show up as stress. The second type of stress I'm going to mention is physical stress. So if you're putting things into your body, for example, that the body doesn't like or takes extra effort to process, like if you're smoking or you're drinking too much alcohol, or even any amount of alcohol for some people, it's something that the body then has to detox. Yeah, so that detoxification process is putting an extra load on the body. So consider it that way. That load is a form of stress on the body. So if you're not getting the right nutrients, you're depleted, it's going to be starting to show up um, as something which is quite stressful for the body. Likewise, lack of sleep. I think we can all identify with that at some point or other where you've had a period of bad sleep. You know, you're just everything just becomes so much harder. Yeah. So these are all forms of
Definitely.
physical stress, and also illness. You mentioned illness,
Mm.
Althea. So that is your body, and so when we're measuring people's stress, if they are ill, it will show up that they're not getting a restful sleep, for example. because their body's maybe
Mm.
fighting an infection, so it's working overtime. Uh,
Definitely. And a lot of people tell me, they have a lot of thoughts coming in, anxiety, negativity, and it keeps them awake. Or physical pain definitely keeps people awake. If you're not comfortable in your body, I mean, you can't sleep. You're up all night, and then of course it's a knock-on effect for the next day that your energy you're not just getting you're just not getting the rest you need.
exactly. So it's a very vicious cycle. Um, the third type is psychosocial stress. So this is where maybe there's relationship issues or conflicts with people you love, people around you, or maybe you don't have enough people that are close to you in your life and you're experiencing loneliness. So that's also a big form of stress. And
Oh,
or
people can die when their loved ones, their partners die, isn't it? The other one pops off because it's too much
exactly, they can't
loneliness or
cope.
something.
Yeah. So bereavement is a form of stress, but also the loneliness of not having that other person around is stressful. Loss of status is another one. So if someone's lost their job, they've in their mind they've lost their standing in life, and it could be for a short period or it could be for a long period, so there's that lack of, again, go back to the lack of control, lack of certainty about who am I if I don't have that job? How do I identify in the world?
There was a guy. Sorry, Mel.
Go
There
ahead.
was a guy who came in the clinic one day, and he was a rugby player, and all he knew was rugby, rugby, rugby. He was spotted when he was young. He trained rugby, 100% rugby, and he came to the clinic, came to me to get his shoulder sorted out because it was damaged from rugby, from and wear and tear, and it stopped him playing. And the poor guy, he was going through a dark night of the soul. He was devastated. It was like that's all he knew. What was he? And it completely rocked him.
Yeah. Well, that in fact probably links more to the fourth and final type of stress, which is psychospiritual. And that is about your lack of yeah, purpose, or you're questioning your meaning of life. And your day to day existence is one of joyless striving. So you might be working hard, for example, but then thinking, why am I doing all this? Is this why I was put on this earth,
Mm,
to grind and do this thing that I really don't enjoy? And so it used to be, I guess, more commonly known as the midlife crisis. But I think people have
okay,
these crises. You can have these crises at any time, I think. I know for me, I
definitely.
was I was just turned 30, I think, when I was in New York, and I was definitely going through this. I was going through all of these things actually. My lifestyle was terrible. I was socializing a lot, so I wasn't looking after myself physically. I was doing a job I didn't enjoy. I was worried that I was going to get fired. In the end, I didn't. I quit. But and also I'd moved from London, where I had a good social scene, to New York, where I didn't have so many people, so I was missing some of those relationships that I had, that I built up in London. So my point about showing this graphic is that there's several things. I don't want to add to people's stress by making them think that there's all these other things that they need to think about, but it's good to have some sort of dashboard, I believe, to refer to when you think about, how am I doing, and are there things here that might be niggling at me in a stressful way that I might not
Definitely,
be.
definitely great. It's like a sort of a
Yeah,
checklist, isn't it? Is it this and is
exactly.
it that? So,
Yeah,
so I think understanding is you're halfway there. If you just know that it's normal, and of course you have stress and anger and resentment or something because of X, Y, Z.
yeah, exactly. So when we talk about measuring stress, I say to people, don't fly blind. So when you drive your car, I mentioned the word dashboard earlier. You do have a dashboard. You can see how fast you're going. You can see what your fuel gauge is like. Um, but we don't tend to monitor ourselves so much. Now this comes with a health warning. I think it is unhealthy to monitor yourself too much. And I think, for example, the device on the right is a Garmin watch, and I had one for a few years, but the strap broke and it wasn't easy to fix. So my wife was actually quite happy that I wasn't wearing it anymore. She said, "You're checking that thing too much. You've become
It
addicted
can
to the
be.
to the data.
Mm.
So I think it's good to measure um, stress and some of these other things that you can measure with devices, but it's important not to get too hooked on it either.
Like anything, yeah, definitely. Like anything, you can get too intense. Like anything, weighing
Yeah.
yourself too much, or maybe it's just me.
Yeah, yeah,
Def-
it's the same thing.
Everything, same
Because
thing.
it can, if you weigh yourself too much and you don't get a reading that you like, well, that sets you up, to have a bad start to the day because you're annoyed with yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So this device on the left is called Firstbeat. In fact, I have one here. So this is something that we use with our clients. So they wear it for 3 to 5 days at a time, and it's like an industrial grade stress monitoring tool. It was initially used for athletes to help them to prepare for Olympics. So they were able to arrive at the Olympics, for example, in peak condition. So what the device was aiming to do is to prevent them from overtraining. So they were able to modify their training workload so that they wouldn't burn out. And so that was about 25 years ago. The device was developed for that. But in more recent years, it's also been used in corporate settings and non-corporate settings where people want to monitor their own stress levels. And so it generates some very interesting data.
Mm.
So when I'm coaching people, I look at the data that the device spits out. So I'm able to help them to interpret it and to draw some insights from the data. So
You,
this is a typical example of what the data looks like. I'm not going to go into it in great depth. You'll see that there's three colors here. So there's red predominantly, some green, and some blue. The red is a stress reaction. So on this particular chart, it shows the day. This at the very left of the chart, it's the beginning of the day. So the person has just gotten up, they're going to work. Uh, they're experiencing mostly stress reactions throughout the day, but you'll see around 12 o'clock, there's a few slivers of green showing up there. So that indicates that they're taking some time out. So they're doing what I advocate people to do, which is to take a lunch break. A lot of people don't, or they eat at their desk and they continue to work through. So it's very important to get moments of recovery during the day. So I like to see some green spots on people's graphs during the day. At the very most people will get green, which is recovery at nighttime when they go to sleep. But there's different qualities of green. So depending on how stressed you are, if you're very stressed, you might struggle then to get a good night's sleep or a proper recovery. So in the case
and
of
with some,
this,
so someone would wear this for 3 days, 24/7, just keep it on
yeah,
them,
yeah,
and 3 days of data. So would it be which days? They're just three consecutive days.
yeah, good
Is it-
question. We normally would advocate 2 work days if they're working, and a weekend day. So often we would say we're at a minimum Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So it's good to compare a work day with a non-work day.
and what if someone's not working?
They can still wear it.
Mm,
It's just interesting for people who are working to compare, how they're coping in and out of work. Yeah,
different kind of environments.
yeah,
So perhaps
exactly.
if someone has the kids at the weekend or the grandkids or whatever, and maybe wear it that day, and then a day when they're just doing their regular, whatever that is, a
Exactly.
regular
So
kind of day,
you can
right?
compare and contrast. That's a good example.
Mm.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this particular graph is you'll see around 1800 or 1900 hours, there's a lot of blue there. So that's them working out. So they've gone to the gym or they've done some sort of workout. And that shows up as deep blue. Now, it's good to get physical activity, so it helps to build a fitness, obviously. But if you do it too late in the day, it can then lead you to be stressed afterwards. And this comes up time and time again, and people are often surprised. Um, those people who do workouts in the evening, or maybe they play five-a-side football, which can be quite late at night, 9 o'clock. Sometimes people
Mm,
are playing five-a-side,
yeah,
and then they go home, but their rev count are still very high,
yeah.
and they're not. winding down quickly enough. And so, in the case of this example, you'll see that even though the person went to bed at 10 o'clock, they're not really getting into recovery until close to 2 o'clock. So that's when the green starts to appear. Now, ideally, there should be green more.
Oh, wow.
The green should be kicking in earlier in the night.
Because it's all patterns, isn't it? I know if I'm up late or I've been out to a dance class or whatever, it's typically sort of 7 or 8 or maybe even later. And you're right, you're just sort of on a buzz or something, and then you want to eat, and then it's getting 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and it's the whole day sort of shifts on, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Energy
exactly.
wise.
So there's always very interesting insights. The other one that shows up a lot, which people aren't too happy to see, but it's life, is when they have alcohol. So they say, "Oh, sometimes I'll have a drink after my dinner or with my dinner and to take the edge off because if I've had a busy day." And it does initially feel very relaxing, but unfortunately, then it becomes something for the body to detoxify when you go to sleep. So usually, after a few drinks, it will show up a very interrupted sleep pattern, very poor sleep quality. So I say to people, listen, because I like to have wine as well. If you're going to do it, be conscious of when you're going to do it, and don't give up your recovery too cheaply.
And this is very revealing, isn't it? Because you've got the colors to see very clear indicators of when someone's stressed, not stressed, saying. So that blue is like physical activity, is it
Yeah,
then?
exactly.
Is that because the heartbeat's going much faster or something?
Yeah, so it measures the heartbeat and your respiration. What the
Okay.
device, there's a lot of devices that will measure heartbeats, but what this is measuring is heartbeat plus heart rate variability. I won't go into the science of it, but it's a good indicator. So it's the beats between the heart, um, in your heart rate. Let's say your heart rate is 60 beats per minute. Not all of those beats will be 1 second apart. There's a natural variance in those 60 beats. And the higher the variance, the more it indicates that you're relaxed, funny enough. The lower the
Okay.
variance, it means that you're quite focused on something or you're afraid of something. Yeah, so
Mm,
that's when you're in this threat mode. So it's a good insight into the autonomic nervous system, so the sympathetic and parasympathetic
mm.
nervous system. So sympathetic is your drive system and parasympathetic is your rest and digest system. So you need a good balance. uh, the Firstbeat model would suggest that you need at least 30% of your day should be in the parasympathetic mode, that which is the green mode on the chart. And
30% of your day.
yeah, 30% of your
Okay.
24-hour day. So most of that will show up in the sleep period. Um,
So this chart is not too bad then, isn't it?
it's not too bad, no. So they've well, they've gotten 30. Yeah, so the restorative effects of sleep is 56 out of 100. If they had gotten into green earlier, when they went to sleep, then they would have got a higher score. So the lesson I think for this person, if I was coaching them, would be to do your workouts earlier.
Mm.
Or
So
if you're
it's
going to,
it's re- it's really good because it's really clear indicator of when the energy's going on. And if someone's not well, or they're stressed, or they're lonely, or they're having a life crisis, or changing their life for some reason, or moving house. So this would be it's a really good indicator about what time of the day and what can you do.
yeah,
It's very easy to see then, isn't it, with your knowledge to see, to advise. It'd be really great to have to go and going for a walk on that moment, that hour, because so and so such and such happens. It's
yeah.
a really good indicator to see the different. We talked earlier about this lady that you told she wore the monitor and she didn't realize she was stressed. Could you talk about
Well,
that
yeah,
lady a bit?
yeah, you get some really interesting insights from people. So what was showing up on her graph was the highest stress points in her day were around 9 o'clock in the morning and also around 5:30 in the evening. And so we get people to take a diary as well, like, of what their activities are during that time. So I think on her diary it showed that she was driving around those times. And I said, "Are you a nervous driver? Do you get stressed when you're driving?" And she said, "No, not really. I said, well, this is these are your highest stress points of the whole day. So it's more stressful for you to be driving than it is to be at work. And she said, "Oh, now I understand." She said, "Because I drop my child off at the creche before I go to work, and sometimes she doesn't want to go, so I'm in a battle with the child to get her dressed and in the car, and so that I can be at work on time. So I suppose I do get quite stressed. It's not the driving that stresses me; it's everything else around that time. And then in the evening when I go
Yeah.
to pick her up." um, I may not be on time, and then I get into trouble with the creche people because they're looking at their watches when I'm showing up
They
late to
do,
pick
and
up the
they
child.
charge you. They charge you for every minute. Every
Yes,
minute you're late. They
right.
really do. Oh, that's stress. Get
So
back
that
quick.
so she was quite surprised to see how that was showing up on her stress profile, but she was also quite thankful because she thought, well, now I'm going to take this graph and show it to my husband because now he must do some of the pickups and drop offs because this is obviously too stressful for me. So this is great
Proof.
ammunition.
She's got proof.
Yeah. So
But I was just, earlier we talked about this, and I thought that's very interesting because she didn't even realize that she was stressed in those times.
no,
Maybe she did, but she didn't sort of consciously realize it. And the graph showed exactly, and you brought it up because you could see it. And then that made her realize and change her behavior and make a decision to do something differently. Poor hubby, but I mean, she made
yeah,
a, from the data she could make, she realized, and then she must know what it's doing to her. So she took action to change
exactly.
something. Mm.
So that's what I would call a quick win. Well, assuming the husband went along with it, but the
We hope.
yeah. Um, and in and of itself, we're not trying to get people to avoid stress completely because if she was getting plenty of recovery, then it may or may not have been a huge issue. But if it
Right.
was one extra thing for
Mm.
her on top of everything else,
And what
it,
and what about if someone's in a lot of pain and having a lot of problems? And a lot of people come into my world, they have long-term chronic conditions or ongoing symptoms. I mean, surely the red's going to show when they're in extreme
yeah,
stress of pain.
definitely. I mean, in my world, I suppose I would see it more with people who, during the time of the monitoring, maybe they're fighting off a flu or something, and they're quite inflamed. Maybe during the night, it'll show up as a red, basically a red sleep for the whole night.
So then
Um,
you could look at that and see what you could do for those moments, or know that maybe it's more in the night time, or it's more in this time or that time. So perhaps, you could have a think about addressing, or how could you help yourself in if those particular moments, because it might be all sorts of reasons why things peak.
well, I think
Um,
with those in those cases, I was saying to people like, why are you then getting up and going to work the next day if you were sick? So it's an example again of patterns. People say, "Oh, I just thought it'd be good to push on through," but actually, the body is telling them, "No,
mm,
it's time for you to rest."
Come on,
Uh,
and people in pain free know all about that bit.
yeah. So
Push through pain.
yeah. So there's a lot of patterns, and obviously, we're only measuring for a few days at a time.
Mm.
So what I would do with coaching clients is if they have one of the devices, they'll have it. They can measure themselves whenever they want, and their data will show up on an app on their phone. I will have access to that data as well with their permission. And so when we have our next coaching session, we will look at their data and say, okay, let's look at your most recent data. Let's see how well you're tracking. Are you improving on some of these things we talked about before? Because I think the big value of this tool for me is it prevents burnout. So when people haven't got access to this data, they're already on the road to burnout, a lot of them, but they don't realize it. And I always said burnout doesn't happen overnight. It happens over quite a long period of time, but people don't recognize the signals. So this gives them the data to read the signals.
I think it's really useful, to analyze, like going to get a blood test from the doctor, to see what's going on, or a diagnosis from the doctor or hospital or something. All those
Yeah,
machines they use, MRI and everything. It's having access to information, especially if you don't know what's going on with you, or you can see that it's your liver, it's your this, it's your that, your that. It's just helpful to know.
very, very
And
helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
to know what's going on, and then you can look at see how you're going to address that. But
Yeah.
it is so yeah, helpful to have knowledge.
Yeah. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it because I've got other things I want to share, but this is something, that I do work a lot with clients on. So if anyone is interested, they can contact me, and I can talk about how to do it as part of a coaching package.
And I'll be
Um,
sending out the recording with Noel's details of how to get in contact.
Excellent. All right. The second of the three things to help build your framework is to understand the science of resilience. So going back to our definition, it was the ability to perform at our optimum level in the face of modern day demands. The the human brain is very cleverly designed. So we have this. What sets us apart from animals is that we have this big um, prefrontal cortex where we're able to use that for cognition and rational thinking. That can get us into trouble if we're thinking too much. Then we can get too worried. Then we have this more primitive aspect of our brain, which is called the animal brain, sometimes known as the emotional brain. Now, this emotional brain holds the key to building resilience, in my opinion. Now, it's often associated with the fight and flight mechanism, but actually, there's other stuff going on there that can really help us. And we built a model that reflects really the workings of that animal brain. And we call it the core model, which stands for continuous optimization of resilience and energy. So if you're able to use your physiology in the way that nature intended, in a way that you get balance, you will keep good levels of energy and have good resilience. So there's three aspects to how this works. So the emotional brain really governs what's going on in the autonomic nervous system. I mentioned that before with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And it governs really three modes of operating, and we're continually alternating between these three modes, which are called defend, achieve, and nurture. So I'm just going to look very quickly at the three of them, and I'm going to share images of the animal kingdom here. So here we have the lion defending its territory, so it's angry. And so as humans, we have, when we sense fear, we sometimes get angry, we lash out, or we may go into more of a flight and freeze mode. So this is the flight, and freeze reaction of the animal brain. So this is natural. It's meant to obviously keep us alive, and it's only meant to be a short term thing, ideally. But because of the way that we live, we're often in this defend mode a lot more of the time than we need to be, because maybe we're overthinking things. Maybe we're constantly triggering ourselves with things that we see, for example, on social media. And so that leads to us, having cortisol and adrenaline coursing through our system, which are the stress hormones. Um, oh, that suddenly switched of its own accord. uh, so it's very fast acting when we have this reactive response, but it can be slow to taper off if we keep um, pressing the gas pedal on our defense mechanism. And this is what the cortisol is actually doing. So it's natural to have cortisol in our bodies in the morning when we get up. It helps us to get up and go and do things. But it's supposed to taper off throughout the day. And for people who have chronic stress, it doesn't taper off. And then you
Mm.
have
And
adrenal
if you
fatigue.
adrenal fatigue, isn't it? And if you've got past traumas or long-term stress or ongoing conditions and symptoms, that's all, fighting through it, isn't it? And managing for the day and running on empty kind of fight or flight energy.
Yeah, exactly. The next mode is the achieve mode, and animals and humans, they like to be excited, stimulated, focused. So here we have the lion out looking for food. So if you've got pets, a sure way to get them to do something you want, like come inside from the garden, is to promise them some food or a treat. And they can be suddenly very stimulated and very focused. So a lot of us are stimulated by the thoughts of a reward, and that keeps us going. I think you mentioned, Althea, your one of your tendencies is to keep working. I think, did you mention workaholism, or did I make that up?
Um,
But so that is a big issue. People don't know when to switch off because they're looking for that next hit of dopamine. Yeah, and the feeling that they're getting somewhere in their lives and they're ticking all these boxes. So it's good to be achieving things. Of course, it is. That's how we develop and grow. But it's also a sympathetic, like the defend mode, it's also a sympathetic reaction. So it's something that's, using up energy. So we need to be careful that we don't overdo that. And
and
so
be
it's
aware of it, isn't it? Be aware of it.
yeah, exactly. So if we're using up too much energy, when we use up energy, we need to replenish it, and that's where the parasympathetic nervous system comes in. So that's the nurture mode. So here we have the lions playing with each other. Animals will play with each other when they're not in defend or achieve mode. So if they're not out looking for food or they're not protecting their territory, they're more likely to be relaxed and playful. And so
Well,
they're
that's
having
that's
those.
what's going on with my cats and killing each other and then licking and then out and then killing each other. But it's play, it's all
It's all
play.
play, yeah. It's play for
Yeah,
them, and so they're releasing oxytocin. It feels good. The connection is strong. So those moments of connection, which a lot of us don't get, I believe we don't get because we're too busy. Yeah. And society has changed that people just don't, stand around and chat. They don't have time for that. Or you have to make an appointment with somebody to have a conversation, whereas previously it was more
it's true. It's true, isn't
spontaneous.
it? But then if you can make an appointment for things. I mean, I met up with a girlfriend, we had a cup of coffee and I feel almost guilty I should be doing something, but it's important, isn't it, to have off time, relaxed time, and it just fills your emotional social cup, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that is a key point, Althea, because instead of seeing it as time wasted, this is very valuable time.
Yeah,
The time, for some reason, my slides are advancing on their own accord. I don't know why, but the yeah, this is really, really important. So rather than thinking that you're wasting time, and I say this, by the way, to parents of young kids when they talk to me about putting their kids to bed, they say it can be a very stressful time. Some parents say that, but other parents, when you look at their Firstbeat data, you'll see moments of recovery because they're connecting with their children, maybe with a bedtime story, for
mm,
example, and it's a lovely moment, and the kids are benefiting from it, and the parents are also benefiting from it. So there's a deep connection happening, even if it's not for a very long time. So for the parents who think it's a stressful time, I get them to reframe it as an opportunity for connection, and so
definitely. I remember, when the kids were little, my daughter came into the kitchen one day and, Mummy, she wants me for something. And I'm like, oh, I've got to wash up, I've got to cook dinner, and it's 5 o'clock, and it's this, and it's that, and it's the other. And I'd been doing a parenting course recent near to that and talking about playtimes is so important. And I thought, you know what? Fine, I'll play with her. And I played with her, and it was this urgent need. She needed me, and I was think as an adult, I was thinking I don't have time. It's going to be half an hour, and then I'm in another mode, and I've got to get back into gear. And but actually, what happened is I stopped. I gave her attention, and it was just 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes of this game she wanted to do, and just looking at whatever. And she said, "Okay, Mum." Off she popped. I was like, "Oh, okay, that's 10 minutes." And I thought she's got her mummy cup filled, and
yeah,
I can get on with things. I thought it was really interesting, and how
yeah.
just highlighting, it's so important just to adapt to the situation and to play.
Yeah, and of course, by connecting, you also need to be fully present, and that's where I
Yeah,
think devices again can be barriers to that connection. If the child is trying to interact with the parent, but the parent's too busy on their phone, it creates a barrier to that connection. So connection is super important,
yeah.
as
Or to
well as
anybody, isn't
yeah,
to anybody. I
uh,
see people sitting at dinner at a restaurant, a couple, both on their phones. It's like, really?
yeah. Listen, I've done it myself, so I'm not. It's
No.
Well, the football scores have to be looked at and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, okay, so these are the three modes. Just to summarize, the animal brain is in charge of emotional regulation. So there are emotions associated with each of these three modes. So when we're in the nurture mode, we feel calm, connected, and we're more likely to be kind to ourselves and kind to others. We're more open when we're in that parasympathetic, relaxed mode. The opposite, of course, is true when we're in the defend mode. We're feeling anxious, cautious, and angry. And then the achieve mode, whilst it can feel good, you don't want to overdo it because you're going to drain your battery. So you're feeling excited, focused, and stimulated. So the optimum way to use this model is to alternate between nurture and achieve. Yeah, so treating your life and your work, for example, as a series of sprints rather than a marathon. So rather than just slogging through with your day or with your week, do a burst of work, be focused, be productive, and then take some time out, go and chat to a colleague, phone a friend, go for a walk, and then come back and do some more work. So I think that's more how we're designed,
Mm.
to operate, and then
And
minimize the defend. So whatever it is that's triggering you, stressing you out, eliminate or minimize. And so
I
that's
think your body guides you as well. So,
if you listen.
you if you listen and you need the loo when you need the loo, or you're hungry, or you need to get some fresh air or move or something, or
Yeah,
be with friends or rest, or do something time out. Your guidance is always there, I think,
yeah. Exactly, but it's about taking the
if you
time
listen.
to listen. Uh, so final segment really is about nurturing yourself. So I'm going to go through this quickly. So now that I've kind of made the case for nurture, the question is how do you go about it and get that into your life? So I talk about the three C's of resilience, which fall into this nurture category. So courage, compassion were the two that we didn't talk about earlier, and connection you had mentioned, Althea. So courage, compassion, and connection. So where does courage come into it? Well, courage is about admitting to yourself that your approach may not be working. So whatever it is that you're doing that may be burning you out or stressing you, maybe it's time to look at that and go, why do I keep doing this thing? Whatever this thing is, that might be where you're overdoing it. Maybe you're a control freak, for example, and you have to be in control of every little thing. Why not just let go of some stuff and let go of the need to be in control? The courage also is about creating boundaries, so being willing to say no where maybe you've been saying yes, yeah, and not being an easy touch for other people. And people are reluctant often to say no because they don't want to be thought of as a bad person, but at the same time, it is taking a toll on them.
That's a big one, isn't it?
Mm,
Creating boundaries. And you
yeah,
know, we were both at that big event just recently, and it was wonderful to talk to so many interesting people. But sometimes, how long do you talking? Somebody wants to talk to you about something, and just knowing the boundaries and saying no. Can you say no? Isn't it? Can you respect your own boundaries?
yeah, you may have to practice it. And I think this is probably, if I'm generalizing, more of a challenge for women than for men. They'll often take on more than they should. So the other one around courage is resolving tension. So maybe if things aren't so that maybe some of your key relationships in work or outside of work aren't so good, you might have to grasp that nettle, have that conversation, or seek mediation, whatever it is, rather than expecting it to magically resolve itself, which it might. But if you're serious about nurture and reducing the stress in your life, you may have to take the initiative and address the issue. But and that takes courage,
Mm.
and having the courage to adopt healthier habits. So to stop going for the comfort food or the drink or whatever it is that you're relying on to cope, it takes courage to change those things, and having the courage to ask for help if you need it. So whether it's professional help or help within your own circle, to say, I'm struggling here, I need some help. That also takes courage, particularly for people who like to, their self-image is developed in such a way that they feel that they're the strong one, and ask where asking for help might be considered a weakness. I think society is generally better on this front. There's much more awareness, for example, about mental health and the importance of getting help. So, but still, it's a good reminder. The
Especially,
second,
we've just
sorry,
been all been through, sorry, no, just we've all been through, the COVID thing and how that divided so many friends and family and all that sort of thing. I think it's happened to everybody, it seems like. And to build those bridges, to build communication between somebody you've argued with or split from or something in some sense, you
yeah,
know, to what will you do? Can you do something there?
or make the tough call to say, well, maybe we're just not right for each other anymore. Maybe it's time to move on from this relationship.
Mm,
And again, that takes courage too.
mm.
Uh, okay. The second C is compassion, or more importantly, self compassion. So being kind to yourself. By the way, I'm more or less on the hour here. Am I okay to take
Yeah.
another 5 minutes, or do
Um,
to wrap
yeah,
up?
just yeah, we need to wrap up soon. So if you cover what's important,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. Well, I'll just fly through these then real quick.
cool.
So, self compassion, be less self critical. What would a friend say to you about how you're speaking to yourself? Being realistic with your goals and workload. Everyone faces challenges, so don't think that you're the only one who's struggling right now. If you're struggling, do what you love what you do. Be guided by your emotions, but don't be governed by them. So if you are feeling down, maybe it's indicating something that you need to look at, but don't identify with it. Don't say to yourself, well, I'm a bad person because I'm feeling sad. Think, well, what is this sadness telling me to look at? So handling things more lightly, I would say. And then the third C was connection. We talked about this a few times already tonight. So making time for loved ones and friends, being present with them, and reducing your time with negative people. So people who just drain your battery, it might be time to minimize contact there. Um, and then find your tribe. People who support your interests, and share your way of looking at things. If you think that's going to be helpful for you, make it happen. Yeah. All right. So that's more or less the framework. I do provide support for people in terms of we provide online video learning modules and tips and assessments, one-to-one coaching support, Firstbeat assessments. So if any of that is of interest to you, I'll share my details here on the final slide. Key takeaways for the things that we've covered. So become stress aware, to build that framework for how to build resilience and reduce your stress. Know what stress looks like in the first place. Understand the science of resilience. There's different models. This is one that we prefer, the core model. And nurture yourself by using those three C's: the courage, compassion, and the connection. I guess we probably don't have time for questions.
Yeah,
And
but, I mean, yeah, but let's please say Karen if you want to ask something, and anybody watching this on the recording, do get in touch with Noel and ask questions. And if you feel like this is all resonating with you. No, that was really interesting. It was lovely to have the structure and clarity and to just step into each sort of area. And it's definitely given me ideas and more self-awareness, things to be aware of. And I love that rhythmical movement, the second one, that it's about, I mean, these things, we know these things, isn't it? But to having it into a lovely sort of clarified ABC and what sort of things to think about. And Karen's just saying, very good. Karen, do you have a question? Do you want to come on and ask Noel? Okay. Let me know if you do. And to have it clarified there, and yeah, I feel like I can, oh, that yes, I'll try that balancing point of nurture and work and nurture. I can't remember your words, but I felt like it was like activation stuff, get things done, and but then nurture. And it's almost like when you set it out like that, it's almost like it gives me permission to think, oh yeah, I'm normal.
Yeah.
I do that,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
uh, yeah, which is really great.
Yeah.
And Noel, so you do offer, of course, you work with the corporate clients, but you definitely work with individuals to help them with the Firstbeat gadget. And somebody could get the gadget and then you monitor it and come back with analyzing it and help someone look at the patterns and help them with this framework. Did I say that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it works is they would order the device. We would order the device for them from Firstbeat. So we were licensed to use the device from Firstbeat. So they would own the device. So to buy the device, and it's also hooked up to an app. So that's a subscription model. So for having the device and having a 3 month subscription is £230. If you want to have the device for the access to the app for 6 months, that's £280. So I would usually build that in. Sorry, the guidance then on how to interpret the data is something that I would build in as part of a coaching process. So let's say every couple of weeks, if I'm with a client, I'll be getting them to check their data, and we'd walk through it together, as well as cover the other topics that we need to cover as part of the coaching. So coaching, I would charge 130 for individual clients, or if they buy a batch of 6 sessions, it would be 690, which is 115 per session. So
Okay, so
uh,
when they pay the first amount to they get to keep the gadgets,
yes,
that's theirs to keep.
yeah,
Yeah, the 230, I think you said, and
yeah,
then they can come onto the app that that gives them the data. They can see the data for themselves. Is
yes.
that right?
Exactly. So that's the Firstbeat app. So they've got the Firstbeat device and the Firstbeat app on their phone, which shows
Yeah.
them, what's going on in real time, when they're using the device.
Okay.
Uh,
And then
and
to get your guidance and support and coaching through the data, and then you guide the framework that you talked about, and then that would be the one-to-one coaching package that you said.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Amazing. So I'm going to be sharing this recording with everybody, and I'll be putting these links and contact numbers with the recording. So you'll be able to get that. It'll be coming to your email tomorrow. And so, Karen, did you have any think of any questions that you wanted to ask for the moment? So, Noel, if I can leave the last word to you, what would you something a word for advice or going forward for somebody that perhaps is listening to this and wants some help, or a word for life?
Word
Can I
for
leave you
life
with
would
the
be
last?
kindness or compassion. I think, because I know with the clients you deal with, Althea, where they're in pain, life it's hard enough when you're experiencing pain. Don't add to it by beating yourself up or expecting more from yourself than you're able to give or able to be in that moment. And so kindness, I think, is very soothing on the nervous system. So you do it to other people or do it to your pets. So why not give that kindness to yourself? So it is very nurture. It's a form of nurture, as I mentioned earlier. So that's just one that sticks out for me, and it's
Beautiful.
something that's within your gift, to give to yourself.
Definitely. And it can be just simply breathing or giving yourself a hug or a favorite cup of tea. Thank you so much, Noel. Amazing. And thank you so much for stepping in at the last minute. And it was very professional and very organized, you did. And I hope that anyone listening to this, and Karen, that you got lots of information and some ahas there and some interesting points. I certainly did. So thank you so much, Noel, for joining us, and everybody who's watching this too. And yeah, so I wish you all a great evening, and think about that kindness, or do some kindness for yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I bring it to a close then. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye for now.